Today in the bunker, we're going to build a motel suitable for the Wasteland. We're going to build one of the buildings from a Plasticville O-scale model kit. It's intended for model railroading, but we're going to use it for wargaming, and it's going to work just great. I have one of these buildings already. I received another one as a gift, so I'm going to build that one, and we'll put them together into a motel complex that we will expand on in later episodes. Alright, these kits are pretty straightforward. There's not a whole lot to them. There's a front wall, a back wall, two side walls, some windows for the side walls, some windows for the front walls, and some doors, plus a walkway for the front and a roof that generally is bent a little bit. So you can either take a heat gun and kind of flatten that out, or lay something heavy on it, or if it's not bent too badly, I just leave it. The way that they go together is very straightforward. It's got some channels cut in there, and they really can only go together, well, I shouldn't say they can only go together one way. You could put them together incorrectly, but you'd have to try. So those go together there. There is a bit of flash, so we'll do some cleaning up on that. Put the back wall on, all that good stuff. So we'll get that all knocked together and glued up and start working on the base as well. The windows are fairly straightforward to go in. There's a set of tabs on the inside and a set of tabs on the window. The tabs go to the inside. So the easiest way to put them in is just to put that in the window underneath the side tabs, bend that up a little bit, and then it'll just snap into place. Don't really need to glue it, they're not loose. You can, I mean, they're not going to come out though. They're very, very sturdy. The doors are basically the same. They've got these two little tabs on them that engage a couple of cutouts in there. You just kind of angle it in, engage the cutout, slide it behind the tab. There you go. And you can glue those to where they're always shut, or you can make them open or whatever. I just tend to leave them. We're also going to add some detail on here later on. We're going to add some doorknobs, because that's something sort of missing from those. The roof, as I said before, is a little bit warped. I've had two of these kits and both of them have been the same, so I'm guessing it's just the nature of the beast when they make it. So yeah, you could heat that up and probably flex it and get it to stay. Put something heavy on it for a while, which is what I may do with this one and the other one, just to kind of flatten it out a little bit. But in any case, these pins indicate where they go. These pins that are closer to the back are the back, or closer to the rim rather, or the edge. English is hard. And they just go right down on there, and you'll kind of know when it doesn't fit tight, but it fits well enough. And if you were going to glue that into place, then you could just hold it down until the glue goes off and it would be fine. I like to at least be able to put somebody in there, maybe not a completely detailed interior, but at least playable. So if you want super mutants to hide in there or whatever, you could actually put them inside, and then they could shoot out the window or do whatever it is the super mutants do inside of an old motel. Who knows? One other thing about the roof is that the ejector pins for the piece are in this pebbled texture, so it's not a big deal to kind of knock them off, and it sort of immediately blends in. You could just leave them, but you can sort of see them, and especially after you paint it, you'll notice, what are those little things sticking up. But easy enough to clean that up. The front walkway has these little cutouts. I believe they're supposed to be for like plants, decorative plants. But in any case, it has a top and a bottom. and the top has these pieces on it. These little tabs here engage in the front of the building. They just kind of rock in there. And once you glue that in place, then it's a fairly solid unit. So we're going to make a base for that out of our usual black chipboard stuff that I use, and we'll get that cut out and ready to mount. What I was trying to remember earlier, this is mat board, but you could use chipboard, foam core. You could use any number of things for a base. I mean, what you make it out of isn't super important as long as it's durable and doesn't warp. And if you're careful, you can make almost anything not warp. So what I'm going to do is cut this out. We're going to glue the building to it. Well, I'm going to cut this out. We're going to treat it with sanding sealer on both sides. That will seal this and give it kind of almost a plastic sort of texture. This will tap more like plastic when you tap it. It'll make it pretty much waterproof or moisture proof, so we can put glue and sand and whatnot on there and it won't warp. So I glued the walkway on, and while it's still not quite set, you sort of angle it down just a little bit. What we're going to do is take our now finished base, well, I shouldn't say finished, but it's treated, and we're going to make that so that it fits right there, and then that whole thing will go onto that base. We're going to hot glue that in place, but that way it's kind of an angle. It just fits on there a little nicer because there's that cutout underneath, and that'll help solidify everything. So I'm going to heat up the hot glue gun and we'll get ready to hot glue it. All right, we're going to add some hot glue along the underside of this walkway, and we'll put some along the edge here just to kind of get that started. Then we're going to fit this together. Try not to get it out of square. It's easy to do, but it's easy to put back. So we will, all right, we're good to go there. All right, so then we can add, and since we're going to add texturing to the base, we can clean that up. We're just going to add a bead of hot glue around the outside and inside of the perimeter of this building, just to add a little strength, make sure it stays where we want it to stay. And these are a little flexible. To help with that, we're going to add in some pieces, some wall pieces I cut out, but I want to get this to the base first. All right, and the wall pieces, we'll just put a little bit of glue on there and set those in place. You can kind of eyeball that just to make it fairly straight. Now, sometimes when you get these buildings used, a lot of times you'll find them where they've either been barely glued together or not glued together at all. Because, you know, once you set it on a railroad layout, it's not really going to move. You're not going to mess with it. Whereas when we build these for gaming, they're going to get picked up and moved and figures put on them and, you know, ham-handed gamers touching them. So try to build them as strong as you can. Try to reinforce them. I mean, they're fairly sturdy, but parts of them can be a little flimsy. As you saw, the walls flex. So it doesn't take much just to add some strength and make them into perfectly suitable gaming pieces. So what we're going to do next is add our texture to the base and texture to this concrete. The basing on this is going to be fairly straightforward, pretty much like my standard basing on all of these sort of Fallout Wastelandy builds. We're just going to smear a little PVA on there, and I'm using Eileen's tacky glue because it sets up a little quicker. You can use regular PVA or wood glue or whatever you have. Just put a nice even coat on there. And because we've treated this, we don't have to worry about it warping. And I like to take a paper plate and put underneath it And then this is just some sand. It's got some coarse bits, some fine bits. This is I got from a construction site years ago. But any kind of sand you have, it's fine. Okay, and we'll knock the really big chunks off, because they don't tend to stick all that well. And if you get it up on that glue, then it just looks like the dirt has kind of moved up and encroached on that building. So we're going to do that, and then we'll come back and put on the texture for the walkway. We're going to use this Vallejo ground texture to add its gray sand. You could use any color. We're going to paint it. It's just that the texture it gives is pretty good for concrete. If you don't have this, you could sponge on a concrete texture. That would be fine. No right or wrong way to do this. Just using this because I have it. If I didn't have it, I would just sponge it on there. But I really like the way this comes out. It's a bit of an exaggerated texture, but at this scale, that's a good thing, because across the table you'll see it and your eye expects to see it. So if it's a little out of scale, exaggerated, that's fine. It'll look good. All right, so we're going to stipple that on everywhere we want that to be concretey looking. And you don't want to do it too thick, too thin. Just do it till it looks right. And remember that you're going to paint over it, so you're going to be able to see that blue underneath, but that's fine. We'll paint that. What we're going for is just the texture. And you could make it as consistent or inconsistent as you like. Concrete is generally a very, very smooth, consistent texture, but not always. Obviously this is a bit, don't get it on the windows, a bit rough, but that again is just to kind of fool your eye, because you expect to see that. Plus it's supposed to be old, out in the weather, not maintained, so if it's pitted or whatever, that's fine too. We're going to stain it and all that good stuff. So we'll finish that and then we'll get ready to prime. For our doorknobs, I just cut a little button off of a piece of sprue and just glued that in place. I used Plastruc cement there. You could use super glue or regular modeling cement, whatever kind of plastic glue you have. And they don't have to be super detailed. They just need to add the impression that there's a doorknob there, and we'll paint that to sort of help with that impression in a bit. So we're going to let this all dry, and then we'll get ready to prime. All right, now that the black primer has dried, and that took a little bit extra time because it was cold out, so paint does strange things in the cold. We're going to, first thing I'm going to do is paint this basing. I'm going to start with some nutmeg brown. And what we're going to do is thin that out a little bit with some water, and then I'm going to add just a dash of my wash, the magic wash, just to thin it out and get it to flow down in there a little bit. Just need something to break the surface tension. You could use washing up liquid, fairy liquid, whatever you want to call it. Liquid dish soap, just a drop or two of that, just to break up that surface tension and get it to lay down in there. And we have treated this with the sanding sealer, so it should be fairly impervious to any of that, although it did warp a little tiny bit, but not enough to worry with. So let me get that set up and we'll get started. Okay, and you can see that you just dab it on and it just flows right down in there. So you get pretty good coverage. Still get a little bit of shadow sort of depth to it, which is good. We're going to cover this whole thing and then we'll be dry brushing, and that'll add to that depth. While the base is drying, we're going to go ahead and apply a base coat to the walls. This has a built-in texture. It's cast in, I guess you could say. So we're going to start with some tan. And well, I've already got some here on the palette that I've thinned out with some water. And we're just going to apply that everywhere that has that texture. And You don't have to be super neat, but neatness does count a bit, because if you can keep it off of things like the windows and whatnot, that's probably just a little better for later on. Anything that's going to get that sort of painted concrete texture or stucco or whatever that's supposed to be, I guess it's probably stucco. This is from the 50s. We're just going to paint over that, including the corner sections. Those are going to be like kind of a painted concrete. So we'll cover all that and see what we get. I put on 2 coats of the tan. I did the one that was thinned first to get it to kind of flow a little better. Then I applied the next coat neat, just straight. I didn't thin it, to kind of get more coverage. And between the two, it didn't work too bad. We're going to go over that with some white, probably mixed with a little bit of tan. I don't want it to be too bright. In the meantime, our basing has mostly dried to the point that we can start adding some more color to it. And if a little bit of it is wet and kind of wet blends, so much the better. That's fine. So what we're going to do is go to a raw sienna, and we'll kind of overbrush some of that on there. What that'll do is just give us a little bit more sort of depth. It's very, very subtle, so I'm not sure that it's even going to show up very well here on the camera, but a little bit of our basing fell off, but that's not a problem. And once you get done doing this and the next dry brushing step, we're going to use some maple sugar tan to kind of make it pop a little bit. If you have some areas that are still a little bit bare, we're going to put on some static grass and some tufts. So that is not a problem. We can cover up anything that we missed or that we don't like. Alright, so as a final dry brushing step on the basing, we're going to use some maple sugar tan. You can use any color you have. None of these colors are hard and fast. Just use what you have that looks close or looks good to you, and it's going to look fantastic. That'll just give us that last little bit of kind of a pop on all of that texture. And again, if you get a little bit of wet blending, not really a big deal. That may be even a desirable effect. So we'll continue on around with that. While all that's drying, we're going to hit the roof section with some pewter gray, and again, just whatever kind of gray you have is fine. And we're just going to kind of damp brush this on. Just going to use the paint neat because we're going to apply some washes and some more dry brushes to this. So we just want to get kind of a gravel texture, because that's what that is. And while we're using the gray, I'm going to go ahead and paint the front walkway as well. We'll get that ready. Now that everything's dried, we're going to go back over the tan and just kind of damp brush on some white. And that'll give it kind of a faded, dirty appearance. And it'll also sort of act like dry brushing. It'll kind of pick up that texture a little bit. There's the other end that we've done. So we'll do this whole thing, and then we'll get started on... I'm also going to dry brush white on the windows and doors because they're black, and we're going to hit them with red, and that'll make it easier for that to show up. So I'm going to do this whole thing and get started. Alright, so there's our coating of white, our overbrushing on top of the tan. It gives it kind of a dirty appearance. I also went ahead and dry brush the concrete white. The roof we're going to dry brush with some tan, just whatever tan you have, just to give it kind of a different tone than the concrete. I'm not sure how well this will actually show up. It's kind of subtle at this point. So we'll get that dry brushed. we'll probably do a couple of dry brushings just to try and really bring it out, because it does seem a little too subtle almost. And here it is after a couple of dry brushings with tan. You should be able to see a pretty good tonal difference between the concrete and that gravel. So we'll hit that with, well, first we'll go and put the red on the windows and the doors. I'm going to use a Vallejo, the Game Color Extra Opaque Heavy Red, because I happen to have this set. If you don't, just, you know, use whatever red or whatever color you have. With the white dry brushing, it should help that pop a little bit. So we'll get that set up. Okay, here's the heavy red. You can see it's very, very opaque, and that's basically one coat. So we'll apply that, and then we'll hit that a second time, and that'll really make that red pop. With the windows and doors all painted, now we're going to go and add a little pin washing around some of the details just to kind of help deepen the shadows near them and really make them kind of pop a little bit. So what I'm going to use is some of my homemade black wash. It's just magic wash and some black craft paint. That's all it is. I just pre-mixed up a bottle. And we'll just take that and move that out of the way. And just kind of lay that in anywhere there's a kind of a corner, or where there needs to be a shadow. That'll help accentuate that. And the same thing on these door panels. That also helps give it a little bit more of a grimy appearance. All right, so we'll go around the whole thing with that. Alright, that's been added to all of the doors and windows. It just helps define them a little better. I'm not sure if it shows up really well on camera, but what we're going to do is take that same black wash, and we're going to use that to dirty up the concrete and the roof piece. And again, there's no right or wrong here. Just take your wash. Could be a brown wash, could be a black wash, could be both. And just make some dirty spots, just to sort of age the concrete, because it, you know, if it's out in the weather, it's not going to be super clean. And just do whatever looks right. So we'll continue on with that. That definitely gives it a much more worn, much more grimy appearance. And again, well, if it'll stay on there, no right or wrong amount to do there. Just make it look as grungy and nasty as you want. So we're going to let that dry for a few, and then we will go ahead and start applying some static grass and some little tufts to try and give some life, quote unquote, to this little piece of the wasteland. For this, I'm going to be using some Woodland Scenics. It's a Harvest Gold static grass. It's kind of a burnt goldish green color. It looks kind of like dead grass. And some Army Painter Mountain Tufts. Again, no right or wrong. Use whatever tufts or grass you have that you know look good on your base. This is just what I'm doing. All of my bases have this format, so they all kind of blend and mix on the tabletop and look like they belong together. So to add the tufts, just get some PVA glue and just put it where you want a tuft to be. And this stuff dries clear, so if a little bit shows after you put the tuft on there, that's fine. And we just take a tuft and just kind of plunk it down into that grass. You can use PVA, you can use super glue, either one's fine. And then to apply our grass, what I do on these bases is just kind of randomly scatter some spots of PVA. Try and make kind of an irregular patch. And then I just take some tweezers, grab a handful of that, put down a paper plate to catch the excess. It's an important step I almost forgot. And then you can just kind of push that down into that PVA. I wish I had a static grass applicator, because that would be super keen, but I don't have one of those yet. I'm going to work on that. Alright, so you get kind of an irregular patch of grass. So we're going to continue on around there. We're going to add a few tufts in the front as well. It doesn't really take much to add a nice wastelandy appearance to a base. Don't be afraid to use some static grass and tufts, whatever colors you need. On any base, really. It doesn't even have to be for Wasteland. Any base benefits from some careful usage of static grass and some tufts. I'm going to try something new. Luke over at Geek Gaming, or Luke's APS, talks about using metallic Sharpies. So I went and picked some up, and we're gonna give that a shot. See what we achieve here. And okay, I see why he likes those so much. That is dead simple to do. You just put that point where you want that color, and there it goes. So that's a winner. Glad I picked those up. Alright, and with that, you call it done here. I may go back later on and add some glass, some plastic sheet in there to simulate glass. It still needs a coat of varnish, but it's way too cold to do that, so I'll have to wait for a warmer day. But all in all, I think came out pretty good and shows the potential that these old model railroad buildings have. Alright, that's our first part of our motel project. We still need to build an office and make some signage. And we'll come back and add some more details, glass, and things like that. So I hope this has been helpful. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Remember to like and subscribe if you like this kind of content. And I thank you for watching.